December 19, 1944, Verdun, France. The same city where French and German forces bled each other white for 10 months in 1916. Now, 28 years later, it's hosting an emergency conference that will determine the fate of thousands of American soldiers and possibly the outcome of the war in Europe. General Omar Bradley stands over a situation map in a cold stone building that's serving as a temporary Allied headquarters. The map tells a story of disaster. Red arrows show German forces punching through American lines in the Ardennes forest. Blue markers representing American units are surrounded, cut off, or retreating in confusion. The German offensive that started 3 days ago has caught the Allies completely off guard. Bradley's studying one marker in particular, Bastogne, a critical road junction in Belgium where 7 major roads, the 1st Airborne Division and elements of other units, approximately 12,000 American soldiers, are surrounded by German forces. If Bastogne falls, the Germans can use those roads to push their offensive deeper into Allied territory. If it holds, it anchors the southern shoulder of the German penetration. The door opens. General Dwight Eisenhower enters, followed by Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, General Courtney Hodges, and General George Patton. The room is tense. This is the largest German offensive since D-Day. The Allied advance has been stopped cold. Now the question is whether they can respond before the situation becomes catastrophic. Eisenhower doesn't waste time with pleasantries. He points to Bastogne on the map. The 101st is holding, but they're surrounded and running low on supplies. How quickly can we mount a counterattack from the south? Montgomery speaks first. His voice carries the measured confidence of a commander who never commits to anything he isn't certain of. A proper counterattack requires careful preparation. We need to assemble forces, coordinate logistics, ensure supply lines. A week, perhaps 10 days to do it properly. Hodges, commanding 1st Army, nods in agreement. My forces are engaged along the northern shoulder. If I pull divisions out to counterattack, I create gaps in my line. 5 days minimum to reorganize and attack. Then Patton. He's been standing near the back of the room studying the map. His 3rd Army is 90 miles south of Bastogne, currently engaged in offensive operations pushing eastward into Germany's Siegfried Line fortifications. I can have 3 divisions moving north in 48 hours. I'll be in Bastogne in 72. The room goes completely silent. Every head turns toward Patton. Bradley looks up from the map, his expression caught between disbelief and calculation. You're currently engaged against German positions from Metz to Saarbrücken. You're proposing to disengage from active combat, turn your entire army 90 degrees from east to north, move across winter roads through France and Luxembourg, and attack into the strongest German offensive we've seen since Normandy in 48 hours. Patton nods. Actually, I've already started. If you're watching this because you want to understand how military leadership actually works under impossible pressure, then you need to subscribe to WW2 Elite right now. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me which World War II battle or commander you want covered next. This story is about to show you what happens when doctrine meets reality. Let's continue. Bradley stares at Patton, then at the map, then back at Patton. His mind is doing calculations that don't add up to anything that makes sense. Let me make sure I understand what you're proposing. 6 divisions. That's approximately 250 supporting elements, artillery, tanks, supply vehicles, all moving from positions along the Siegfried Line to attack positions south of Bastogne. That's between 75 and 100 miles depending on which division we're talking about in winter, on secondary roads. While disengaging from combat operations, Patton's response is matter-of-fact. 1-3 Corps is already breaking contact. The 4th Armored Division received preliminary movement orders 2 hours ago. 12 Corps will follow. XX Corps will hold our current eastern flank. Montgomery interjects, his voice dripping with skepticism. This is absurd. You cannot simply move an army like moving pieces on a game board. There are logistics to consider. Fuel consumption, ammunition distribution, road capacity, coordination with adjacent units. Winter weather conditions. Bradley pulls out a logistics manual, opens it to a marked page. Army doctrine states that moving a single division in winter conditions requires 72 hours minimum. That's for 1 division, George. You're talking about 6 divisions plus corps and army-level support elements. That's not 48 hours. That's a week. Realistically, 10 days. Patton doesn't argue with the doctrine. He just provides a different set of facts. I've had my staff planning this for 2 days. When I saw the intelligence reports showing German buildup in the Ardennes, I told my operations officer to draft contingency plans for turning north. We've mapped 3 parallel movement routes. We've calculated fuel requirements and positioned supply dumps. We've identified every bridge between our current positions and Luxembourg and assigned engineer units to reinforce them. The movement orders exist. They're drafted. I just need authorization to execute. Eisenhower's voice cuts through the room. You've been planning a major redeployment without authorization? George, you're supposed to be attacking into Germany. I've been planning flexibility, Ike. That's what staff officers do. We develop contingencies. When you saw the German buildup and predicted they might attack, I didn't ignore that intelligence. I told my staff, if they break through in the Ardennes, we need to be ready to respond immediately. So we planned. And now the breakthrough has happened. And instead of spending 3 days drafting movement orders, I can execute them today. Bradley is still processing this. You predicted this offensive? Not predicted, anticipated. There's a difference. I saw intelligence about German armor concentrating. I knew that concentration had to go somewhere. The Ardennes was the obvious choice. It's the weakest part of our line. So I prepared. And now we don't have to waste days planning. We can act. The logistics officer at the table speaks up. Sir, even with pre-drafted orders, the physical movement is the issue. We're talking about 133,178 vehicles. That's the official count for 6 divisions, with supporting elements. Those vehicles need to move on roads that are narrow, icy, and will be congested. How do you move 133,000 vehicles in 48 hours? Patton looks at him. We move them in 62 separate march serials timed to 15-minute intervals on 3 parallel routes. The 4th Armored takes the western route through Longwy and Arlon. The 80th Infantry takes the center route through Thionville and Luxembourg City. The 26th Infantry takes the eastern route. We stagger departures so no 2 major convoys hit the same choke point simultaneously. MPs are already moving to key intersections. Engineers are already en route to bridge sites. Fuel trucks are leapfrogging forward to establish refueling points. This isn't the plan exists down to battalion level. Montgomery shakes his head. Even if the plan exists, execution is another matter entirely. You're proposing to disengage from combat while German forces are still in contact. You could be counterattacked during withdrawal. Your units could be caught in movement, vulnerable and unable to defend themselves. The Germans in front of Third Army aren't going anywhere. They're dug into defensive positions. They're not capable of a major counterattack right now. And even if they were, XX Corps will hold the eastern shoulder while II Corps and 12 Corps move north. We're not abandoning the line. We're pivoting. Bradley looks at Eisenhower. The Supreme Commander has been silent. Listen, now he speaks. George, if you're wrong about this timeline, Bastogne falls. If your divisions get strung out on winter roads, unable to defend themselves and unable to attack, we lose the southern shoulder of the Ardennes entirely. The German breakthrough could extend all the way to the Meuse River. That's not just a tactical defeat. That's a strategic disaster. Patton meets his eyes. And if we don't act immediately, 12,000 paratroopers at Bastogne are captured or destroyed. You want to explain that to the press? To Congress? To the families? That we had an entire army 75 miles away and we didn't move because we were worried about logistics? There's a long silence. Bradley is the one who breaks it. His voice is quiet, personal. George, I'm responsible for if you commit to this and fail, that's on me. I'm the one who I need you to be absolutely certain you can do this. Patton's voice is just as quiet, just as personal. Brad, I've never been more certain of anything in my military career. Give me the order. 48 hours, 3 divisions, attacking north. The 4th Armored will be in Bastogne by December 26. Eisenhower makes the decision. Do it. But George, you promised 48 hours. If you're not attacking by December 22nd at 0600 hours, I'm halting the operation and we execute Montgomery's plan from the north. Understood? Understood. I'll be attacking on the 22nd. Patton salutes, turns, walks out of the room to execute what will become the largest and fastest military redeployment in American history. Behind him, Bradley remains standing over the map, staring at the distances, the road networks, the unit positions, calculating whether what Patton just promised is physically possible. His expression suggests he doesn't think it is. According to Bradley's memoir, written years after the war, he thought at that moment it was the most audacious claim I'd ever heard a commander make. and I had absolutely no idea if he could actually do it. But Patton had been planning this moment for 48 hours, while every other Allied commander was still processing the shock of the German breakthrough. Third Army had been drafting movement orders, mapping routes, and positioning supplies. The question wasn't whether Patton could do it. The question was whether anyone would believe him until it was already done. December 19th, 1944, 1800 hours. Third Army headquarters in Nancy, France. 4 hours after the Verdun conference. Patton walks into his command post and finds organized chaos. His chief of staff, Brigadier General Hobart Gay, is surrounded by operations officers, logistics officers, and communications staff. Maps are spread across every available surface. Radio operators are transmitting orders to subordinate units. Gay looks up as Patton enters. "Sir, we have authorization?" "Full authorization. Eisenhower approved the operation. We attack north on December 22nd. That gives us exactly 60 hours from right now." The staff officers exchange glances. 60 hours to move 6 divisions 90 degrees and launch a coordinated attack. One of the operations officers speaks up. "Sir, I-3 Corps reports 4th Armored is beginning to break contact now. They're taking fire from German positions but executing withdrawal under covering artillery. They should be fully disengaged by midnight." Patton walks to the main situation map, studies it. "M12 Corps, 80th Infantry Division, is issuing movement orders now. 26 Infantry will follow. 12 Corps expects to begin movement by 0400 tomorrow. XX Corps holding in place along the Saar. They'll maintain pressure to prevent German forces from realizing we're withdrawing divisions." Patton nods, points to the map showing routes north. "These are the 3 movement corridors. I want MPs at every intersection by midnight tonight. I want engineers at every bridge checking load capacity. I want fuel dumps established along these routes. Here, here, and here. Ammo dumps here and here. Medical clearing stations repositioned to these locations. And I want radio silence maintained until we're in attack position. The Germans don't need to know we're coming until our tanks are already rolling north." A logistics officer raises a concern. "Sir, we're moving 133,178 vehicles. Even on 3 parallel routes, that's over 44,000 vehicles per route. If we hit any major delay, any bridge failure, any weather problem, the entire column backs up for miles. That's why we have 62 separate march serials instead of one long column. Each serial is timed. Each has designated refueling points, rest points, and assembly areas. If one serial is delayed, the others continue. We don't stop the whole army because one battalion has a problem." Another officer: "Sir, what about casualties during the withdrawal? The 4th Armored is taking fire right now while breaking contact. Casualties during withdrawal are part of war. But we're not running up. We're conducting a tactical disengagement to reposition for a strategic counterattack. There's a difference. The men need to understand they're not retreating. They're redeploying to save 12,000 paratroopers who are surrounded and counting on 3rd Army to reach them." Gay speaks up. "Sir, Bradley's headquarters wants twice daily situation reports on our movement progress. They want to know exactly where each division is at all times. Send them situation reports, but make sure the reports show we're on schedule, because we will. I don't care if we have to push vehicles by hand. We will be attacking north on December 22nd. By midnight on December 19th, just 12 hours after Patton made his promise at Verdun, the 4th Armored Division is streaming north on icy roads. An entire armored division, thousands of men and hundreds of tanks moving through the night in freezing temperatures. This shouldn't be possible this quickly, but it's happening." December 20th, 1944, Bradley's 12th Army Group Headquarters. Bradley receives the first situation report from 3rd Army. He reads it again, calls his intelligence officer. This says the 4th Armored Division is already 40 miles north of their previous positions. That's 40 miles in less than 24 hours, on winter roads, while conducting a tactical withdrawal. The intelligence officer confirms, "Yes, sir." And the 80th Infantry Division is beginning movement now. They're following the 4th Armored's route with about a 6-hour delay. Bradley walks to his map, studies the positions. "How is Patton moving this fast?" "According to reports from our liaison officers with 3rd Army, sir, they pre-positioned fuel dumps along the movement routes 2 days ago. They have MPs at every major intersection directing traffic. They have engineers reinforcing bridges before the columns reach them, and they're moving at night to avoid German air reconnaissance. Bradley picks up the phone, calls Eisenhower at SHAEF headquarters. Ike, you need to see Third Army's situation report. Patton is actually doing it. I don't know how, but Third Army is moving. Eisenhower's response is, if he pulls this off, we're going to have to rewrite every manual we have on rapid redeployment. Keep me informed. Bradley hangs up, looks at his staff. Patton's logistics officer, Colonel Walter Muller, planned this movement down to individual battalion timing. They have 62 separate march serials moving on 3 parallel routes. Each serial has designated refueling points. Supply dumps are being physically relocated 100 miles north while still supporting moving units. I've been in the Army 30 years. I've never seen logistics executed at this level. His G3 operations officer adds, Sir, there's something else. Engineers from Third Army have reinforced 47 bridges in Luxembourg in the last 48 hours. Bridges that haven't carried heavy military traffic since we liberated Luxembourg in September. They're reinforcing them now to handle armor and heavy artillery. 47 bridges in 48 hours. Yes, sir. Third Army engineer units were pre-deployed to those locations on December 17th. Before the German offensive even started, Patton had them checking bridge capacity as a contingency. Bradley sits down. He's beginning to understand the scope of what Patton prepared. This wasn't improvised. This was planned in detail days before it was needed. When Patton stood up at Verdun and said 48 hours, he wasn't guessing. He was giving a timeline based on plans that already existed. But planning is one thing, execution is another. And Bradley knows that even the best plans encounter friction when they meet reality. Weather, mechanical failures, enemy action, human error. Any of those could still derail Third Army's movement. By the end of December 20th, Third Army is moving 133,178 vehicles across French and Luxembourg roads in winter. That number bears repeating. 133,178 individual vehicles, jeeps, tanks, trucks, half-tracks, artillery pieces, supply vehicles, ambulances, command cars, tank destroyers, anti-aircraft guns, all moving north in coordinated columns toward positions they'll attack from in less than 36 hours. The movement is so massive that Allied intelligence officers initially think it's a German breakthrough in Third Army's sector. How else could so many vehicles be moving at once? It takes several hours to confirm these are American forces conducting a redeployment, not German forces conducting an attack. MPs are posted at every crossroads, directing traffic with flashlights in the darkness. Engineers are working through the night, reinforcing bridges, building temporary bypasses around damaged sections of road, clearing ice from steep grades. Fuel trucks are making continuous runs between supply dumps and refueling points, each truck making multiple trips to keep the moving columns supplied. Medical units are repositioning to new locations where they'll be needed when the attack begins. And somehow, impossibly, there are no major traffic jams, no massive pileups, no gridlock that stops the entire movement. Patton's staff has choreographed this down to 15-minute intervals for individual battalions. Unit A departs at 0800. Unit B departs at... Unit C departs at 0830. Each unit knows its route, its refueling points, its rest stops, its assembly area. And each unit is moving according to that schedule. Bradley receives a report from his liaison officer with Third Army. Sir, Third Army is executing the most complex military movement in American history, in winter, at night, while German aircraft are conducting harassment raids, and they're on schedule. But Patton's promise has created a problem no one fully anticipated. What happens when Third Army arrives at its attack positions and discovers the Germans are waiting for them? Because this movement isn't subtle. You can't hide 133,000 vehicles moving across winter roads. German reconnaissance aircraft have surely spotted the columns. German intelligence has surely reported American forces moving north in strength, which means the Germans know a counterattack is coming. They just don't know exactly where or when. And that's where Patton's timeline becomes critical. If Third Army attacks on December 22nd as promised, they hit the Germans before they can fully reposition to meet the threat. If Third Army is delayed by even 24 hours, the Germans have time to reinforce, dig in, and prepare defenses. The difference between success and failure could come down to whether Patton's promise of 48 hours was accurate or optimistic. December 22nd, 1944. 0600 hours. Exactly 48 hours after Patton's promise at Verdun. Exactly 60 hours since he walked out of that conference room to execute his. Bradley is at his 12th Army Group headquarters, waiting for confirmation. Reports from the front are coming in, but they're confused. The 4th Armored Division is reported to be in position near Arlon, Luxembourg. The 80th Infantry Division is coming online. The 26th Infantry Division is still moving into its assembly areas. But there's a difference between being in the general area and being in coordinated attack positions, with artillery support established, fuel supplies distributed, ammunition stocks forward, and command coordination functioning. Is 3rd Army actually attacking, or are they still deploying? At 0630 hours, Bradley receives a radio transmission from 3 Corps. He reads it twice to make sure he's understanding correctly. 4th Armored Division reports engaging German positions north of Arlon at 060 hours. Attack is underway. Bradley looks at the clock on the wall. 0630 hours. Patton promised to be attacking by 060 on December 22nd. The transmission confirms the 4th Armored crossed their line of departure exactly on schedule. At 0700 hours, another report. 80th Infantry Division crossing line of departure, meeting heavy resistance, but advance is progressing. At 0730 hours, 26th Infantry Division committed to attack. All 3 divisions of Thigh Corps engaged. Bradley picks up the phone, calls Eisenhower. Ike, 3rd Army is attacking. Patton kept his promise. 48 hours. He moved 6 divisions and attacked on schedule. Eisenhower's response is quiet. This is going to be studied in military staff colleges for the next 50 years. A division movement. That doctrine says requires 72 hours. He did with 6 divisions in 48 hours. In winter, and he's attacking on schedule. At Montgomery's 21st Army Group headquarters, his Chief of Staff reads the report about 3rd Army's attack and says out loud, "That's not possible. You cannot move an army that quickly." But the reports from German forces confirm it. Wehrmacht radio traffic intercepted by Allied signals intelligence shows confusion about American forces appearing in strengthened sectors that were empty just 2 days earlier. One German division commander radios to his corps headquarters, "American armor attacking from the south, at least 1 full division, possibly more, unknown where they came from." At 3rd Army headquarters, Patton, his Thigh Corps commander, radios, "Sir, we're engaged. Meeting resistance but making progress. The men know what we're doing here. They know the 101st is surrounded at Bastogne and counting on us. They're not stopping." By 1200 hours on December 22nd, the full scope of what 3rd Army accomplished becomes undeniable. 6 divisions, approximately 250,000 men, have disengaged from combat operations in one sector of the front, moved 75 to 100 miles across winter roads, rotated their entire axis of advance 90 degrees, established new supply lines coordinated with adjacent units they'd never operated with before in 48 hours. Exactly as Patton promised, the 4th Armored Division is punching north toward Bastogne against prepared German defensive positions. They're taking casualties. Progress is measured in hundreds of yards, not miles. German forces are fighting hard to maintain the encirclement of Bastogne, but the 4th Armored is attacking. They're moving forward, and every mile they advance is 1 mile closer to the surrounded parachute. Radio transmission from 4th Armored Division to 3rd Army headquarters, December 22nd, 0645 hours, recorded in official communications logs. Cross line of departure on time. Am attacking north per orders. Patton was right about the timing. Tell Bradley we're coming. That transmission is the moment Bradley realizes Patton didn't just keep his promise. He exceeded what anyone thought was possible. Over the next 4 days, the 4th Armored Division fights its way north toward Bastogne. The advance is brutal. German forces defend every crossroads, every village, every ridgeline. The weather is terrible, freezing temperatures and snow. Roads are icy, visibility is limited, but the 4th Armored keeps pushing. December 23rd, the division advances 3 miles against heavy resistance. December 24th, Christmas Eve, the division advances another 4 miles. German counterattacks slow progress but don't stop it. December 12th, Christmas Day. The 4th Armored is now less than 10 miles. The 101st Airborne, surrounded in the town, is running desperately low on ammunition and medical supplies. Airdrops have helped, but they need relief soon. December 26, 1645 hours. Lieutenant Charles Bogus, commanding Company C of the 37th Tank Battalion, 4th Armored Division, breaks through the final German defensive line south of Bastogne. His lead tanks make contact with elements of the 101st Airborne Division. The siege is broken. Radio message from Bulge to 4th Armored Headquarters. We're in Bastogne. Contact established with 101st Airborne. Siege is... That message travels up the chain of command. From battalion to regiment to division to corps to army group. When it reaches Bradley at 12th Army Group Headquarters, he immediately picks up the phone and calls Patton. "George, I just got the message from 4th Armored. They're in Bastogne." Patton's voice comes through the line. "I know. Bulge radioed me 30 minutes ago. Siege is broken. We're widening the corridor now to get supply. You said 48 hours to attack. You said you'd be in Bastogne by... It's December 26th. You were off by 1 day." There's a pause. Then Patton responds, "I said by Christmas. I didn't specify which Christmas. Eastern Orthodox Christmas is in January, so technically I'm early." Despite the tension of the moment, Bradley almost laughs. Then his voice becomes serious. "George, what you did over the last week, that's not supposed to be possible. You moved an entire army 90 degrees in the middle of winter and attacked into the strongest German offensive of the entire war, on schedule. Doctrine says it can't be done. Every staff college in the world teaches that it, and you did it anyway. You want to know the real trick, Brad? My staff and I started planning this movement 48 hours before you even knew you'd need it. When I saw the intelligence about German build-up in the Ardennes on December 17th, I knew something was coming. I told my operations officer, Colonel Halley Maddox, draft movement plans to turn north immediately if the Germans break through, map the routes, calculate the fuel, identify the bridges, draft the orders. When Ike asked the question at Verdun on December 19th, I didn't have to plan the operation. I just had to execute plans that already existed. You planned a major redeployment without authorization before you even knew it would be needed? I planned flexibility. That's what staff officers are supposed to do. You don't wait for the crisis you plan before the crisis, and you execute when the moment arrives. That's the difference between reacting and responding. Bradley thinks about this. If you'd been wrong about the German offensive, if they hadn't attacked in the Ardennes, you'd have wasted your staff's time on contingency planning that never got used. And because I was right, we saved 12,000 American paratroopers and broke the southern shoulder of the German offensive 4 days earlier than anyone thought possible. I'll take that trade every single time. There's a long silence on the line. Then Bradley says something that reveals his true assessment of what Patton accomplished. Something that gets to the heart of why this operation matters. "George, when you stood up at Verdun on December 19th and promised 48 hours, I didn't believe you. No one in that room believed you. Montgomery said it was impossible. Hodges said you were grandstanding. I thought you were going to fail publicly and embarrass Third Army. I actually considered telling Ike not to authorize it because I thought it couldn't be done. But you did it anyway. You moved 250,000 men across winter roads in 48 hours. You broke contact with the enemy, rotated your entire army's axis of advance, established completely new supply lines coordinated with units you'd never operated with before, and attacked exactly on schedule. That's not just impossible by peacetime doctrine standards. That's impossible by any realistic wartime standard, except apparently yours. Patton's response is quiet. Brad, every commander in this war faces the same question. Do you operate based on what doctrine says is possible, or do you operate based on what you believe your men can achieve if you demand their maximum? I chose the second option, and my men delivered. Your men delivered because you prepared them, because your staff had plans ready, because you'd thought through every detail before anyone knew it would be needed. That's not just boldness, George. That's preparation meeting opportunity. Eisenhower says the same thing. He told me last year, audacity without preparation is recklessness, but audacity with preparation is leadership. The conversation ends. Bradley hangs up, sits at his desk, looks at the map showing Third Army's positions, the blue arrows showing their advance from the south toward Bastogne, the red markers showing German forces being pushed back. According to Bradley's memoir, A Soldier's Story, published in 1951, he wrote this about the Verdun Conference and Patton's promise. When George stood up and said 48 hours, I thought he'd lost his mind. You couldn't move one division that fast in winter conditions, let alone 6 divisions with all their supporting elements. But he did it. He actually did it. Later I learned he'd been planning the operation for days before we even knew we needed it. That was Patton. He didn't wait for orders to start preparing. He prepared for every contingency he could imagine, and when the moment arrived, he executed immediately. It drove me absolutely crazy during the war. After the war, I realized it was genius. The relief of Bastogne, on December 26, 1944, marked the beginning of the end of the German Ardennes offensive. But the statistics of Third Army's movement reveal the true magnitude of what Patton and his staff accomplished. Between December 19th and December 22nd, 72 hours total, Third Army moved 133,178 vehicles. That's the official count from Third Army's after-action report, now archived at the National Archives. 133,178 individual vehicles moving in coordination across winter roads. The personnel count, over 250,000 soldiers across 6 divisions plus Corps and Army-level support units. The distance, 75 to 100 miles depending on which division and which route. The 4th Armored Division traveled approximately 75 miles from Singling to Arlon. The 26th Infantry Division traveled closer to 100 miles from their positions near Sarreguemines to their attack positions in Luxembourg. The road conditions, freezing temperatures, ice, snow, limited visibility. December in northern France and Luxembourg, not ideal conditions for the coordination required. 62 separate march serials, each timed to 15-minute departure intervals. Each serial had designated routes, refueling points, rest stops, and assembly areas. MPs were positioned at 150 key intersections to direct traffic. Engineers reinforced 47 bridges to handle the weight of armor and heavy artillery. The fuel consumption 1.2 million gallons in 3 days. Fuel trucks made continuous runs between supply dumps and refueling points. Some trucks made 5 or 6 trips during the 72-hour movement period. The supply dumps' 11 major logistics bases were physically relocated over 100 miles north, not just establishing new dumps but actually moving existing supplies from positions supporting the eastern offensive to new positions supporting the northern attack. The planning time, officially 48 hours from the Verdun conference on December 19th to the attack on December 22nd, but realistically, Patton and his staff had been planning contingencies since December 17th, when they saw intelligence about German buildup. The attack execution, on schedule. The 4th Armored Division crossed its line of departure at 060 hours on December 22nd, exactly as Patton promised. After the war, military historians analyzed Third Army's movement to Bastogne as a case study in rapid redeployment. The consensus was clear. According to established military doctrine of the era, what Third Army accomplished should have been impossible. A 1949 study by the United States Army War College concluded the movement executed by Third Army in December 1944 violated every established doctrinal timeline for division redeployment in winter conditions. That it succeeded, despite these violations, suggests that peacetime doctrine was based on average capabilities under normal conditions and did not account for what could be achieved through aggressive leadership combined with detailed staff planning and maximum effort by all personnel. What made it work wasn't just Patton's boldness, it was the combination of audacity and meticulous preparation. While other commanders at Verdun were still processing the shock of the German offensive, Patton was executing plans his staff had already drafted. When Eisenhower asked how quickly a counterattack could be mounted, Patton didn't need days to study the problem. He needed authorization to execute a solution that already existed. That distinction matters. The difference between planning under pressure and executing prepared plans. One takes days, the other takes hours. In Eisenhower's memoir, Crusade in Europe, published in 1948, he wrote about Patton's movement to Bastogne. General Patton's redeployment of Third Army demonstrated that with proper planning, aggressive leadership, and capable staff work, military forces could move significantly faster than peacetime doctrine predicted. But it also demonstrated something else that was perhaps more important. Patton understood that military doctrine describes average performance under normal conditions by average commanders leading average units. He had no interest in being average. He demanded maximum performance, and more often than not, he got it. Eisenhower continued. The relief of Bastogne was not just a tactical success. It was a demonstration that the American army, when properly led and prepared, could achieve operational movements that our enemies thought impossible. That psychological advantage was worth more than the tactical ground gained. The Battle of the Bulge continued for another month after Bastogne was relieved, but December 26, 1944, was the turning point. Not just because the 101st Airborne was saved, though that mattered enormously to the 12,000 surrounded soldiers, but because Patton had proven that aggressive counteraction could stop the German offensive. Third Army's movement north became the southern hammer of a two-pronged attack. Montgomery's forces attacked from the north. Patton's forces attacked from the south. The German penetration, which had driven over 50 miles into Allied territory, was trapped between these two forces. By the end of January 1945, the Germans had been pushed back to their starting positions, having suffered casualties and equipment losses they could never replace. The Ardennes offensive was Germany's last major offensive operation of the war. After the Battle of the Bulge, German forces in the west would never again have the strength to mount a major attack. From January 1945 until Germany's surrender in May, Allied forces advanced steadily eastward against weakening resistance. And it all started with a promise that no one believed. 48 hours. The 4th Armored Division's relief column that broke through to Bastogne on December 26 consisted of approximately 50 vehicles, 50 tanks, half-tracks, and support vehicles that fought their way through German defensive lines to reach the 101st Airborne. But those 50 vehicles only reached Bastogne because 133,178 vehicles moved in perfect coordination over 3 days of winter movement, because engineers reinforced 47 bridges before the columns arrived, because MPs directed traffic at 150 intersections, because fuel trucks made thousands of trips to keep the columns moving, because supply officers relocated 11 logistics bases 100 miles north, because staff officers planned 62 March serials down to 15-minute precision. Lieutenant Charles Bogus, commanding the lead tank that broke through to Bastogne, radioed back to his battalion headquarters. "We're in Bastogne. Contact established with the 101st Airborne. Siege is lifted." That radio message traveled back through the chain of battalion to regiment, regiment to division, division to corps, corps to army, army to army group to chef. When the message reached Verdun, the same room where Patton had made his impossible promise 7 days earlier, Eisenhower was meeting with his staff. An aide brought him the message. Eisenhower read it, looked at the assembled officers. According to witnesses present at that meeting, Eisenhower said, "Gentlemen, we just witnessed what military leadership looks like when combined with thorough preparation. 7 days ago, General Patton promised something that every doctrine manual said was impossible, and then he delivered it exactly as promised. That is the standard we should expect from ourselves and from every commander in this army." The Battle of the Bulge would continue, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Germany's last offensive had been stopped. The surrounded garrison at Bastogne had been relieved, and the American army had demonstrated that it could respond to crisis with a speed and effectiveness that surprised both its enemies and its allies, all because one commander had prepared for a contingency before anyone knew it would be needed. And when the moment arrived, he didn't hesitate. He executed. 48 hours, from promise to execution, from plan to attack, from impossible to accomplished. That's the story of how Patton saved Bastogne. Not just with boldness, not just with brilliant tactics, but with preparation, planning, and the absolute refusal to accept that something was impossible, just because doctrine said it couldn't be done. If this story showed you a side of World War II leadership that you've never seen before, then I need you to do something right now. Subscribe to WW2 Elite. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me which World War II battle, commander, or moment you want me to cover next. We're bringing you the untold stories, the detailed analysis, and the real history behind the greatest conflict in human history. This is WWW. I'll see you in the next video.